And now to Dover, where the queues are unbelievable, as far as I can tell. And yet, apart from Kieran on this programme last week, I've heard barely a mention of them in those British newspapers that we talked about at the beginning of the programme today. I have seen Bloomberg reporting on this. Joe Mays, journalist that we spoke to quite a lot in the, can we say the good old days of Brexit? I don't think we can we? No one's going to buy that. But he doing astonishing work, continues to do astonishing work in this field. They've done a story on it, and of course social media is full of pictures. I don't mean anything by this. I can't take them all as gospel, all right? There are some people on there that I have struck up relationship with. Some people in various fields have become contacts as opposed to mere followers or people I follow on social media. But every single picture put up by every single person on Twitter, a much more serious end of the matter would be some of the Russian propaganda that's being put up by the Russian government, which doesn't tell the truth at all and often features pictures that were taken in completely different countries at completely different times, which they're claiming are happening in Ukraine today. But so I don't know for sure how bad it is. I do know that the Bloomberg article I just referred to is pretty shocking. And I do know, because I played it to you earlier, that Chris Grayling, along with every other Brexiter, remember, along with every other person who was opposed to the idea of a second referendum or simply measuring twice and cutting once, having another referendum on the question of whether or not this was actually what you were expecting for when you voted in 2016, Chris Grayling was absolutely adamant in 2018 that what is currently happening in Dover, and one of the pictures I'm looking at from a source I do trust, makes the point that I may be talking about parking tickets. After years of mocking the notion of doing parking tickets as a radio phone-in topic, it's like, for those of you who don't listen a lot, it's like a textbook example of something that a radio phone-in host can do that will make the phones ring but won't make interesting radio. Right, I think there's a danger of the transgender narrative being pushed by the Daily Mail at the moment, falling into a similar category. But you never know. My judgment is far from infallible. But parking tickets and e-scooters and the like of it are the absolute gold standard. The phone lines go up like a Christmas tree. Absolutely nobody has anything interesting or unpredictable to say. Immigration, historically, would fall into that category as well, although that beast is currently in abeyance. So this point is made, it looks like, with a picture of the roads leading from Maidstone all the way to Folkestone and Dover, it looks like you might finally be able to do parking tickets, James, says Rusty. The problem with that rather good gag is, of course, that the stationary vehicles in the relevant roads don't want to be stationary. They want to be moving. So 9 minutes after 11 is the time. What is going on? There is the question. What is the reality of the trucks on the road? But perhaps more interestingly, or a way we can make it more pertinent, how does this affect me? So we're now looking at 23 miles of motorway that are shut outside London. That's almost unbelievable. This was at 11 o'clock. This was about almost to the minute. This article was filed yesterday. A 23-mile coastbound stretch of the M20 was closed from Junction 8, which is Maidstone, to Junction 11, which, road fans, is Westenhanger, to store thousands of lorries heading for the Port of Dover or Eurotunnel as part of Operation Brock. I think it's only fair to remind you what Chris Grayling said just 4 years ago.
Kent, where Dover is the Garden of England, and a lorry park, because it's estimated that queues 29 miles long, would be the result of a 2-minute check on lorries going through Dover. Chris Grayling, you're the Transport Minister, the Transport Secretary. What are you going to do to prevent it?
So the answer to that is absolutely not, for two reasons. The first is that we will maintain a free-flowing border at Dover. We will not impose checks in the port. It was utterly unrealistic to do so. We don't check lorries now. We're not going to be checking lorries in Dover in the future. Absolutely clear, it cannot happen. The second point, well, it can't, and it won't.
The customs union.
I mean, because you're in Europe now, so there are no checks.
Okay.
When you leave Europe, there may be.
That's an announcement. There is going to be a customs
Let me be
union.
clear. We will not, in any circumstances, create a hard border in Dover that requires to stop every lorry in the port of Dover.
How
It's
will
not
you,
possible to
what
do
will
it.
you do then when you have tariffs between Europe and us?
So we will not stop lorries in the port of Dover. Goods flow through borders almost seamlessly around the world. Anyway, go to some of our ports on the East Coast that take goods from outside the European Union, where the goods flow through smoothly and depart pretty much as soon as they've arrived.
Let's hear from the people of
That's
Dover.
what's going to happen.
That's the assurance from the Secretary of State for Transport.
Do you know, I have to say this with a slight sense of incredulity, but at least he meant it. I mean, he was categorically and horribly wrong, but I honestly think he believed it. He wasn't actually lying. He's just a bit dozy or just a bit naive or just, didn't really understand his brief. I know that it's a little odd to sound like I'm defending him. He was the Secretary of State for Transport at the time. But you need to remember this was an era of British politics where the Secretary of State for Brexit publicly revealed he didn't understand the importance of trade between Dover and Calais until he became Secretary of State for Brexit some years after telling you to vote for Brexit. And I look back upon that period, and now, of course, unless I don't know what you need to have done to be still clinging to the idea that this was in any way going to be good for the United Kingdom. But you go back to that period, and we sat here many mornings, didn't we, listening to absolute claptrap. But, of course, you couldn't prove it was claptrap until it actually happened. And now it's happening. A 23-mile stretch of the M20 was closed, exacerbated by the P&O suspensions, the suspension of P&O Ferries. But the idea that there won't be checks, stated there by the then Secretary of State for Transport, has been shown to be complete hokum. And yet, everybody who sat here in 2018 repeating what Chris Grayling said, or deriding people telling the truth as metropolitan liberal elites or Ramonas or whatever it may be, are still pretending it's a good idea, even though it's now the polar opposite of what you swore blind it would be just 4 years ago.